86. Still here.
Mhm.
Yeah. Kind of have a topic today.
Yeah.
Language. And what it means. How language can, I guess, affect not just your thoughts and your emotions, but maybe even like the greater world around you. We saw an interview on Open Minds on Gaia with he's a Lakota Native American. I don't know if he was a chief.
I know. I don't think so.
Man, and he spoke in his native Lakota language for some of it, and just the way I don't know how to describe it. The frequency of that language is so wildly different, and even Regina noticed it too on the show. It's so I'm trying to think of the word I want to use here. I was going to say primal, like grounded and ancient in a way that English is not. And we've heard a lot of languages over the years, in TV shows and travels and whatnot, and it's like it's in its own world, that language. And maybe, I mean, I'm sure there's others, maybe other Native Americans, maybe like the indigenous languages of I don't know what the indigenous languages of like New Zealand or Australia sound like, but I mean, even Sanskrit doesn't have that, and that's pretty old.
Have you ever heard anyone speak Sanskrit?
I think so.
Oh, I don't.
I think I've heard a YouTube video of someone speaking it,
I
just
don't.
to hear what it sounds like.
Yeah, I don't think I've ever heard Sanskrit spoken. Like whenever ancient Egyptian, right? Like people try to pronounce it, how they think it would be pronounced. I'm trying to think. I think it's spelled without any vowels.
There are a lot of weird languages spelled without vowels. Hebrew is spelled without vowels.
But like vowels, there's but like the alphabet that they decided to recreate, that it was allegedly Egyptians, they had vowels there. But like the language itself does not. But when you pronounce it, like somehow there's this vowel sound that is in it.
Right. It's interesting. There's a lot of languages that are so ancient that there's no way we can really know what it sounded like. Maybe we have the written record. Maybe we can somehow Rosetta Stone our way into what that means. But what does it sound like? It's like there's a guy on Joe Rogan talking about, was it ancient Sumerian, and how difficult it is to interpret it, because there, if you're learning any language other than that, there's a sound associated with this letter, or this symbol means this sound, and this sound means this word, and that's almost how you learn it, right? But with this, there's no sound. It's just like these cuneiform, it's cuneiform, right? Sumerian structures mean house or table or whatever, and you completely bypass the auditory component of the language, and that's just got to be weird and difficult.
Yeah, I don't know. You talking about the guy that had the whole argument with Billy Carson?
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know. I guess from the etherical standpoint, what we used to do is we used to communicate telepathically, right?
Right.
And so the sound was there more of as an expression of like the emotional state of being. or like the energy that you wanted to interpret into speech, right? But like you wouldn't necessarily need to use speech for like day-to-day communication.
Right. That's the one of the interpretations of the Tower of Babel story that we heard recently, and I like this one. Is that's the real outcome of the Tower of Babel, is that the telepathic ability was taken away, and then we had to communicate with language. And A, we probably didn't have a lot of practice with it, and B, it's a lot harder to convey ideas with the limited construct of whatever language that happens to be. Let's even say it's just one language instead of a bunch. That's it's hard enough to convey like a deeper anything that's not trivial and surface. It's really difficult to convey that with language instead of if you've ever channeled anything or gotten what we like to call a download. It's like it's a completed package with a complete understanding of the whole thing in a way that just a string of words really doesn't do.
Yeah.
So like, if whoever it may be, whether that's, quote, God or the extraterrestrials or the Anunnaki or whoever decided, oh, these humans are getting a little too advanced, we need to take them down a level, and they did something to cut off our telepathic abilities. The Mayan Incan, who was it that said that they sprayed a vapor in the air to basically dumb us down and remove some of our capabilities.
Yeah, Paul Wallace said that, but Paul Wallace did a lot of his stuff based on African cultures. But I don't know if he was also referencing Mayan.
I thought that was
or maybe it was Mayan. I don't know.
either Mayan or Incan. I don't remember
Well,
because
like,
I thought he kept mentioning Viracocha in the same context.
oh, maybe. Like he was implying the Viracocha was the one that did it, because I thought Viracocha was the bringer of knowledge, not the
Right. Well, this
the
was maybe
controller.
after that. Oh, I don't know.
I
Either
mean,
way,
this Stitchin, in Stitchin's work, he says that when they first designed their human prototype, the human was I guess, like, he doesn't say that the human was more advanced or was capable of more potential. I don't think Stitchin says that, but everybody has said that. And I don't know if this because they implied it or because I just missed it, Stitchin implying that. And
oh, is that what oh, the South African guy?
Michael Tillinger.
Yeah, isn't that what he said too?
Yeah, possibly. Yeah, well, Michael Tillinger, I guess, does the whole research with the ancient sites in South Africa.
Yeah, of which there are like tens of thousands.
Well, his family's background is in mining, right? And most of the South African rich white families made their money in mining of some sort.
Yeah.
And then I guess because Stitchin mentioned that Anunnaki mine gold in order to spray it into their atmosphere in order to save their planet, implication is that it was done in Africa.
Yeah, well, there's a lot of gold in South Africa. That's where
Just even further up than South Africa.
Oh, maybe. I know there's a lot of gold in South Africa.
Yeah.
They've dug out over the years.
Yeah.
I thought
And
that was like one of the main reasons the British came in to try to take it, because a lot of gold in them hills.
Yeah, and so I think the implication was that, like, the Stitchins, I don't know if this is even language based or not, but maybe this is a story of how language fucks us over. Because the race was supposed to just basically be a worker race, and then later they kept on upgrading or changing it. I don't know why. That eventually, like, it just became to the point where the gods did not like how the race was turning out, and then they had to either cataclysm it out themselves, or I guess in Viracocha's story, or however the story is that Paul Wallace mentioned, is suppress it through vapor. I don't know what that means.
Right.
Right. But I guess who was it? There's a Paul Wallace that pointed out that Was it that I derived that idea? Was it no? Paul Wallace maybe pointed out that that if it's vapor, right, then the genome was not altered not to have the powers,
Right.
but it was vapor that suppresses the powers.
Right. He really pointed that out, which means that we still have that latent power in us, and it's just through either choices of what we eat, what we drink, what we consume, not just food wise, but even like media and environment wise,
Mm-hmm.
that it is possible to resurrect those latent powers.
Yeah, or you could go about it also the language that we communicate.
Mhm.
Yes, if our intention manifests our reality, right? Then language. How many of us watch our words? Like I don't watch my words.
Right. No, it's sometimes I try to, but obviously not all the time.
Yeah, and to that same extent, like right, the subconscious thought that is done in language.
Yeah, because like
Right, because if we think subconsciously in language,
I think consciously in language. I mean, I don't know if most people do or most people don't, but my thought is largely a narrative of describing what I'm going to do or what I'm thinking. It's very, very word based, which is obviously not the most efficient way to think, right? Sometimes it's visual, but like it's like a little voice in my head. Just it's me, my voice in my head talking to me. That's how I think. And if those words are not good words, kind words, if they're what do they call it? Intrusive thoughts? Yeah. And then the intrusive thoughts come to pass in reality, and people wonder why.
yeah, the lately, like the trauma that we've been processing. What I was talking about,
Mhm.
how like you can't even access trauma, but then like it's because it's tied to concepts that are language based. Like sometimes it helps to use a word
Yeah.
to go into that trauma.
Yeah.
But like, but that means like our energetic system is locked, and we use words as tools to try to access an energetic form.
Right. Even the fact that that uh feeling emotion wheel. I think we've shown it before. It's that wheel, and it's like, oh, here's anger, and it's like there's a quarter of the thing is red, and under anger there's rage, and there's I don't know, all these frustration and whatever, and then maybe those split out into the various things, and it gets more defined, more specific of what it means by anger. And I found that helpful in the past, because I'm like, I don't know what I feel, and then I have to look on the wheel. I'm like, that's it, I'm frustrated, that's it. And I didn't know I didn't know the feeling that I had, what it was, until I linked it with frustration. I'm like, aha, that's it. And yeah, in the same way with trauma, I'm like, I feel something, and I'm like, well, this is close, but this isn't it. And eventually, maybe I'll get to a word, and the word is like, ooh, that's the word. That's the word that's like bringing tears to my eyes. That's the word. So it can be helpful in that sense, but it's harmful in the sense that you have to like go through all this rigmarole to even come up with a word that is ever so slightly different from that word. That and it isn't even the word; it's what the word means to you, right? The exact same trauma to someone else may have a different word, because that word is not in that same mental neural channel somehow.
Yeah, but in that same way, I've been using the word unsafe.
Mm-hmm.
And to you meant something completely different.
Right. To me, I've never felt unsafe in a And I took that as this like physical thing because, I grew up, I always had shelter, I always had food, I always had water, I always had stuff. I was never wanting anything. And so I just took that to mean unsafe until last week, 2 weeks ago. And it's like, oh, I've had a really narrow definition of unsafe. And if I were to change that, yes, I felt and still feel very unsafe. It's a different unsafe than yours, but it's still
How
you know
would you know how my unsafe is though?
just the way you describe it, with not having food, not having being cold and stuff. And so I'm like, oh, that's just not my experience. So I somehow had tied unsafe to that, and so I tied it to having the bottom level of Maslow's pyramid taken care of. I have safety. That's the bottom level of Maslow's pyramid. That's what I thought. When not necessarily. It's I felt unsafe in a different way, but it is definitely unsafe.
How much harm is there in having a language basically define your reality? Right? Or using language as this outside tool. Like how everybody always talking about how like everybody's projecting out or they're trying to find an excuse of why they're feeling on the outside. To some extent, language might be that too. Like instead of just feeling what you're feeling and not having to define it.
We're almost compelled to define it, like just through the nature of the way that our language-based minds work.
That's what I mean. Like, so how much harm is there in that? Just like not allowing the energy to flow as is without definition,
Mhm.
without even like parameter of like, oh, it could be like a spectrum of this, right? But just allowing, if it's discomfort and the energy is uncomfortable, allowing the uncomfortable to flow.
Um, Daniel Schmachtenberger talked about that. Like he's like, most kids ask a parent, "What's that?" pointing to a tree, and the parent will say, "That's a tree," and that'll be the end of it. And he's like, that's so tied to it's tied to language. It's tied to whatever language you happen to speak. And while yes, that gives them the knowledge of this word is equivalent to this thing or those things. Um, Instead, going over to whatever it is that's tree in this example and exploring it. What does it look like? What does it feel like? Oh, look, it's got bugs in it. And it's got squirrels in it. It's got birds' nests. And what do you think's underground? Oh, there's roots underground, and there's this and that. And really going into the concept. And this is while yes, we in English we call this a tree, and in Spanish we call this arbol, and in all these languages they have these different names. But this is a maple tree, and there's different types of trees, and there's a lot to unpack there if you're trying to teach something. And in as much as we should all, I think, be learning all the time, that's kind of the goal of being here is to learn. We should almost take it from that perspective of my goal is not just to know what is the name in English of this thing, microphone, but what is it? We say what is it, and people think we mean what is it called. Instead, it's what is it? And there's a lot more to it than microphone.
Yeah, but
And that
in
doesn't mean you have to be a microphone expert. And is it dynamic or is it a condenser microphone? Blah blah blah. But maybe you could explore topic, especially the ones that you're interested in.
how does it relate to energetic separation of language?
I think because just knowing the name of it is really superficial, and you get more connection to whatever it is if you explore it deeper than just the word. Cacao. 5 letters, and that's it. Does that do it justice? There's a lot more to cacao than just 5 letters.
Yeah, but I think that comes down to, like the description you gave about the tree or description that you gave about cacao. Right? Like there's an outflow of action that I could be sitting here drinking cacao. Or there is, I think what's missing is this like subtle next level interpretation of separating yourself from the physicality and actually going into all energetic interpretation of things.
Yeah.
And that's what I'm talking about.
Okay.
Right?
Yeah.
Like instead of defining the tree, having roots and then providing shade and maybe it's a house and whatever. What language has done is, besides the fact that in this case, you're still interpreting language, but in the case where you're just saying it's a tree versus describing everything that a tree could possibly be, you're still stuck in a language parameter.
I mean, it is difficult to use anything other than language to describe something. I mean, you can feel it, you can see it, you can touch it, you can taste it. But at the same time, obviously language is the shortcut we have to take this entire experience and wrap it up in 5 letters. And take the entire tree, the ants and the roots and the leaves and the nest and all that, and wrap it up in 4 letters.
Yeah, but my point is, language basically allows us a tool to go out and not connect to things energetically.
To abstract it away?
Well, no, to completely
disconnect?
Forgo our sense of energy. I think that's the disservice. The service is, to some extent, whatever point Daniel was trying to make, probably maybe goes in the right direction, but maybe not. But it's still the wrong teaching, I think. I think the teaching would be is, if you go and connect with that object from your etheric energetic plane, what is it that you feel? What is it that you know? And then that should be your definition, as opposed to trying to dive more into language and to describe every nuance of what a tree does and does not do still in language. You can have a feeling about this tree and how important it is to a squirrel or an ant and how important it is to the ecosystem, but that is still done through language. What I'm saying is, what if language wasn't there?
Right.
What if we were required to walk around and feel things as they are without placing a definition on thing with whatever language you happen to be speaking?
Buckminster Fuller divides tools into 2 categories, like tools that one person could make and use. You could make a hammer yourself. You can make a spear yourself, stuff like that. And then tools that would take more than one person to use, such as an aircraft carrier. No one person's going to build an aircraft carrier. It can't be done. In the first,
probably. I mean, give it like enough years.
I think from raw materials. It's like, here's a mountain. There's probably some iron in there. Make an aircraft carrier.
Like you saying, like if this person dedicated their entire life to building an aircraft carrier from raw materials, this would never happen.
In order to build an aircraft carrier, you have to, you have to be able to smelt iron. You have to be able to turn iron into steel. You have to be able to develop, electronics and radar and, I assume aircraft, because there's no point in an aircraft carrier without aircraft. There's a lot in an aircraft. An aircraft carrier is, you have to be able to develop, a modern aircraft carrier has, some sort of nuclear powered engine and stuff. There's an awful lot into that. From like, here you are, you're alone on planet Earth, raw planet Earth, go.
Are you primitive? Do you have any tools?
Like,
or do you have a plant?
You have
no plant.
You have you. That's it. There's no plant. Like a factory.
Mm-hmm.
No, the factory is something that you would have to build the factory to build the electronics And then you have to build the factory to build this, and you have to build the factory to build
But
this.
maybe the right question is, if it's only you, why in the fuck do you need an aircraft carrier?
There's that.
But, did Baumeisters fully answer that question?
I think he picked a really complicated example to make his point. But
the fact that he picked a complicated example and within itself was a fallacy of why in the fuck do we even need that if it's only you? Maybe it's a problem within itself.
Right. Well, there's a lot of really complicated stuff that makes no sense if it's only you. The microphone doesn't make a lot of sense if it's one person on a planet. I guess maybe you could record yourself for posterity, but like a camera, it's like why do you need a camera? Who are you going to show it to? Right. Like a car, right? You might be able to make a bicycle, maybe, but that would be really hard because you might be able to make a really primitive bicycle. No chains, no gears. I don't know how the wheel would work. Are you going to synthesize rubber? I don't know. But maybe, I don't know. This is beside the point. The point that he went on to make was the first high-level tool that required more than one person was language. Now that is something that is, when I read that, I'm like, wait, that's not a tool. Because I think of a tool as, a hammer or a screwdriver. I'm like, no, I guess it is a tool. It's something that you use to achieve some goal. The goal here would be to communicate with our mouths, or maybe written.
Yeah, I think to some extent, though, I would agree that it probably was given to us as a tool if we did not have telepathic communication, right? But at the same time, we took it as a tool and we have identified it as ourselves.
We really have.
Right? Like our language, in fact, right, I spoke Russian to begin with. I know Ukrainian, and then I speak English now. I think there's this frequency of identity that is brought in through the language.
I think so. Well, I think people who speak more than one, who know more than one, really have a different perspective on the world than people who are limited to one.
No, but I'm just looking back and now it could be solely it could be that I'm convoluted this identity with just an age at which I stopped speaking one language and started speaking the next. So it could be just a traumatic event that took place at adolescence, right? And then oh, here's how I was, and then adolescence sets in, and then here's I am, and I am through my psychosis associating it, through that as I'm assigning this is the trauma preset and this is the trauma exploration, and that's the frequency thereof. It could be that. But if we go into, going back to that Lakota dude, right? When he spoke it, I know nothing about it.
Right.
There's no trauma or preconceived notions associated with it.
He said word, and he's like, and that means blah, 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 blah in English. And I assume, of course, I assume that's true, but it's the weight of them is so wildly different.
Yeah, but
knowing what it means.
Yeah, when we travel and we speak, we heard people speak French, and then we hear people speak German, and we hear people speak Portuguese and Spanish, right? There's this generalized energy that comes with the language that I think sets in identity. Because we rely on language for identity, the language frequency, the entire bandwidth that it covers, brings in that identity.
There's this joke meme where it's like, oh, people who speak French sound like, and it's like they have a picture of a teddy bear. People who speak English sound like, and it's like some sort of little lizard. And people who speak Russian sound like, and it's a picture of a dragon. And then people who speak German sound like, and it's Cthulhu, the destroyer of worlds. Something, I don't want to say anger in the language, but there's a lot of, I don't speak German, but hearing German, there's a lot of, I don't know what the word is. something in it.
Yeah, but
and I know World War II and World War I. I know, and I wonder if go back, to before that, if it still has that. Is it just that, or it just has a sharpness to it that French certainly doesn't.
yeah, but
French is just smooth and
maybe
seductive in a way.
Maybe a better way to look at it would be, what is the frequency of the language, and what has the history and the outcome of that group of people has been thus far. And right, this is the chicken and the egg, but I think it goes like even beyond that. Like, if the frequency of German is X, and there's a lot of harshness and a lot of
strength.
To me, it's just harsh. Such a harsh language. But if there's a lot of harshness in it, and so thus, does it not correlate to the harshness of the civilization, the entire group of people that speak German, regardless whether they're in Germany or not?
Right.
And then does that then dictate the frequency of the cumulative group of people that would find themselves German, right? Speaking German. And then if the frequency is preset with this energetic flow, then does their outcome in the world, like their karmic cycle, does it not solely propagate out of that identity of language?
Yeah, I don't know.
And I think it goes that far. I think
Maybe. Napoleon was French, and he conquered half the world. Alexander the Great was Greek, was Macedonian, Macedon, is that his own language? Greek, let's say. He conquered half the world. Persian Empire conquered half the world.
Yeah, but right now you're going back into the history, and so far you're naming everything and everybody who potentially would have had some sort of anomalous behavior that might or might not be associated with their particular language predetermined.
Is Hitler not anomalous behavior?
Well, no.
Or is that
what I'm saying is anomalous behavior without the language, right? Like, so the guy that I spoke with on the plane from Galapagos, he said that all the German people are too eager right now. Now, I don't know this, of course, this is a story passed down. All too eager to point out that Hitler was not German and he was Austrian. I don't know if that is correct or not, but like this guy's girlfriend is German, and he spends a lot of time with her family, and then he keeps on teasing them about the whole German situation, right? And they're all of them are just always pointing out to him, like reminding him that Hitler was not German; he was Austrian.
Is that a? I feel bad. I don't know. Is there a significant? Is that a cultural difference between German and Austrian? Because when we went to Austria, everyone spoke German. That was the official. Well, was that the official language because the Germans invaded?
I don't know. We can look it up. I don't even know if Hitler was actually Austrian. But what if the Tower of Babel story and the separation of beings, earthly beings, into these groups is simply a karmic extrapolation of experience, future events, right? That nation, that group, that this communal orientation of people would experience, period. And the easiest way to insert somebody into that experience, the easiest way is through language.
Yeah. Okay.
Right. So like when you come into Earth, you have no presets, right? Like you come here to experience a specific experience of life, like specific experience of Earth. And then your soul then would determine what country to plop into based on what karmic lessons or would be your earth experience in this lifetime.
Right. And it's like naively, you might just think that's cultural.
But the culture is determined
here
by the
versus
language.
there, you know.
The culture
is determined by the language, right?
Right. So,
or at least heavily influenced by it. It can't not be. And at the same time, the language is also influenced by the culture too. Right? Languages evolve. Like, I heard that if you go back like 500, 800 years, we wouldn't be able to understand English.
Yeah, because our experience evolves.
Right.
The goal is to always have a variant of an experience on top of itself. But one of the easiest way to do that is keep on changing the underlying base of what you come to set into when you come in here. And the easiest way to do that is what's the base? The first thing you learn is not like, oh, here's this feeling, here's that feeling, or here's a movement of energy with this or that. No, you learn language. The first thing that parents start shoving into your face is mama, right?
Mama.
And that's it. Do you know what I mean? So there's the programming starts with the language, but if the language is the cumulative representation of the country or the morphic resonance of like collective consciousness, then by default you would fall into that expression. Like, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
In fact, think about this. When kids are born into a country that has like peace, like just peace, right?
Mm-hmm.
The set of words that they would learn, I mean, one experience, but the set of words that they would learn would be different than like the group of kids who would be born and then raised in war.
Yeah.
Right? Like there had stories of the kids in Ukraine, like there was a psychiatrist, I think they were studying something, and the kids in Ukraine that were, I don't know if they were at like a hospital or an orphanage or somewhere, but their drawings went away from homes and like the sunshines and the people and the stick figures to like rockets and missiles.
Like war rockets?
War rockets, right? So they're, right, but then, right?
That's what they're thinking. That's what's on their mind.
That's what they're on their mind. But then also, that is what's being spoken around them, right? This, what are we speaking? Oh, a missile might come, or, you know, there's, you know, there's no electricity because the hospital has been bombed, or, you know, whatever.
Sure.
Do you see what I mean?
Yeah.
Like the language that then they're becoming to experience and then take on as their set of, what is it that we say? They said that we speak like, it was ridiculous. I don't remember what we only utilize some very small number of words out of any language.
Yeah. And I mean, different languages have different numbers of words, but yeah, the average, well, it depends on what, you know, grade level you speak at. The higher the grade level, the more varied your vocabulary would be. But most people, it's like a third grade level or something. Like the newspapers are like at a third grade level, and it's you know, a couple thousand words.
I'm not saying what grade level, it doesn't matter, but we only utilize a certain number of words.
I mean, at grade level also means, you know, grammar complexity, but I mean just the number of words in your vocabulary. Yeah. It's surprisingly small.
Yeah, but if the number of words in your vocabulary is small and you always land at an average, therefore, if the average number of words that you would utilize are in the situation of war, the percentage of your vocabulary that would be terms of war-like environment would dominate your language.
Yes.
Do you see what I mean?
That makes sense. I mean, yeah.
And so therefore,
whatever, you know, yes. I mean, generalized, you know, you're only really using a couple thousand words. And if a large percentage of those happens to be war or peace or love or whatever, that's going to eat up a large chunk of your psyche in a good or bad way.
It's not even what eats up your psyche. That is the vibratory state of being at which your entire system operates. Because that's the words that you're using day to day to define your reality.
Yeah.
The kids, right, who are drawing rockets through morphic resonance, propagating. I know this is going to sound terrible, but that is just how manifestation works.
They're bringing more rockets.
They are bringing in more rockets, right? Because they're living at the heightened awareness of trauma as their reality. And until they have some sort of psychological intervention where they see a future outside of this, right? But they're able to see a future outside of this. The reality of the country will not change. I'm not blaming kids. The kids are just solely there as a byproduct of the collective consciousness that has that already vibrating, right?
Right. But the collective consciousness, I mean, you lived there. I mean, this is years ago, but you said it's still never really healed from World War II. That's still very, very active on everybody's.
Yeah, the collective consciousness vibrates war, right?
Oh yeah. The whole, not just Ukraine, but Russia too, and probably a lot of the whole former Soviet bloc.
Yeah, like the
I mean, probably Poland. They didn't have it great. Maybe France to some degree. They were.
No,
most of Europe was
no. If
taken over.
If I was raised by my grandma, who was literally in World War II, occupied by the Germany, part of my vocabulary was one, hearing Germany, hearing all those terrible stories, right? So if the stories I grew up with were the stories of this unprocessed trauma that grandma kept on relaying to me, right? That was part of my psyche. But again, through language, right? Those are the words that then I knew how to take on.
To this day, if there are certain words you hear in German, you have a very visceral trigger to that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, but I don't know, but I think maybe like to some extent, like through trauma and trauma of language, right? In this case, like it just sits there as kind of like this pulsating like radio signal, like listener, right? Like it's a radio listening for like the following words. If you hear the following words, it's danger.
It's like Siri, basically. It's looking for the keyword.
Sure.
We both look to see if it got activated.
Right. And I'm just heightenedly aware, always listening to specific words.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. No, I think I'm completely correct. I don't know how this would ever be provable. But that the culture, the language sets in the frequency of operation at which the soul would experience their karmic cycle in particular region. And then thus, German being what it is, and Russian being what it is, and English being what it is. Right? Think about this. Whenever you go to New Jersey, right? I'd pick it out just because it's like the most idiotic interpretation of English to me.
Shout out to all of our New Jersey listeners.
Well, no, but it's very fast paced. It's like, to me, it's like scrappy and hustly, and it's like almost like a survival tone.
Mm-hmm.
The energy that they have when they speak. Now, I am completely like blanket statement.
Right.
Prejudicing against all New Jersey people.
I mean, they really play it up in movies. Like people from New Jersey sound like this.
Yeah, but if they play it up in movies,
like this,
right? Like
it's a
trope. Right?
Yeah, it's a trope.
It's a trope. But I want to say that trope, think about that. It has a frequency of what they feel like, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like energetically going back into that thing, it's a very scrappy, fast-paced hustle language, right?
Sure.
But a lot of New Jersey comes out of, full-blown immigrants.
Yeah.
Like, and more so probably, at least like suburbia immigrants, more so than like Northern New York or something, right? because that mentality of what I need to do in order to survive is built into the language. And so if you're like fast-paced New Jersey trope type of a speaker, I bet within itself, your karmic life, your karmic cycle reflects whatever frequency that language, I say language, in fact, it's English, but that dialect of English delivers within itself.
Right. I mean, there's if you just grab a random average person from New York and a random average person from, I don't know, Louisiana or Georgia, the New York person is going to talk a lot faster, a lot more. I don't want to use it powerful, but a lot more, domineering, because that's the nature. And if everybody does it in New York, you have to do it in order to compete.
Well, no, you're not even competing. That's the language cadence that you learn.
Right. But the people from the South, they're very, in general, they talk slower. They're laid back. They're not, as aggressive sounding as the people from New York.
No, but I bet their life completely reflects the speed of the language that they speak.
Yeah, that's where I was going. Is that it's a
But they learn the language at the speed that they learn.
Yeah, I'm not saying this is better, worse, right, wrong, good, bad. It is it seems to me, having been to the north and been to the south, it is a slower life in the South and a faster life in New York City.
Well, no, I'm just talking about Jersey.
Well, yeah, and sure. I mean, the only Jersey I've been to is Newark, right there, which is basically New York as far as I'm concerned.
Sure, right, but
it's the whole energy of the region is just manic as well.
Yeah, but the energy of the region reflects the cumulative consciousness. But if you come in as a child and you learn, right, the language sets in that pace, right? You start speaking quicker. You use the words that just sound quicker.
Mm-hmm.
Do you know what I mean?
Yeah. And
I don't know, what is it that they do in Jersey? Do they do nya?
I'm not sure.
I don't know. There's something that they do with the vowels that is different than what they do with the vowels in the South, right? South has this stretched out.
Yeah, draw.
Like Texas has a huge draw, right?
Yeah, sure.
So just within that, whatever they do with that particular instance, I bet somehow builds into the nature of their intended experience on Earth. I would guarantee that.
What's interesting and terrible is that, the people, we all speak English. We're all in the same country, but yet they all are, not all of them, but a lot of them are prejudiced against each other. The people in the South think the people in the North are angry and too competitive and I don't know what. And the people in the North think that South are dumb and slow, or, I don't know what, but there is this weird tension between all the corners, not just corners, but the whole, the whole country. Not everybody, obviously, but that exists.
But why?
Because
this is a perfect example.
This is basically Tower of Babel level stuff. Is that there's this they're different. I mean, we're all the same, but they're same country, same color, same nationality, but they sound a little bit different than me. Danger.
No, but danger is extrapolated out and projected out onto the right. So if the northern people think southern people are stupid, right? That's not the truth, but that's the projection that they see the southern people as, right?
Yeah.
But then why? Because they feel like if they were to operate at that frequency or that frequency band or in that pace, it is unsafe.
Right. And it may actually be in your, if New York City seems very competitive, and if you were to not be moving at the speed of everyone else, you would fall behind.
But the trauma of the speed and the pace at which the language sets in your experience determines the safety that you require in order to go back, go to bed at night and go, okay, I feel safe. But if you were to wake up and all of a sudden get transplanted into, oh, there you go. If a Southerner were transplanted into New York without just teleported in and they woke up in that reality, if they did not start to change the language at the pace at which they would operate, if they were not aware, cognitively aware of their personal development, they would feel extremely threatened by the pace and language and everything that is unlike them.
They would stand
in
out.
New York.
They would stand out a lot.
No, but besides standing out, if they were not aware, they would automatically feel unsafe because the environment, the vibratory frequency at which everyone is functioning, one through just the generalized pace, but the general pace is also the language, is completely different than how they are. And then they would feel the need to sink into the cumulative, right? And belong into the social norm, because otherwise their mind would make them think that it's unsafe. Now, if they have done awareness work and they realize that is how the psyche operates and all this and all that, and they're an enlightened person, they could keep their identity of the Southern, right? There's a story. Yeah, there was a story somewhere. There was some sort of news anchor. I remember, I don't know any details about this except that I remember the gist of it. There was a news anchor that came in from somewhere into a region where they did not have a Southern draw, but the anchor had a Southern draw. And the anchor, TV anchor, which again, completely generalized statement of prejudice here. But, if you're on TV, chances are you have low self-esteem. And so being on TV means I'm seen and I'm wanted, I'm desired. Therefore, your pain body is, I want to be wanted and I want to be desired and I want to be, perceived that way. And so the anchor through the pain body wanted to sink into the cumulative of whatever this region was. Right. And in the TV industry word, fitting into, you would have to fit into whatever the dialect that you're in order to be akin to your target audience that watches your news anchor channel. That's what they usually try to do. But sometimes the directors, I guess, or the news station people try to bring in someone who is different just to get people to tune into the different.
Sure.
Right. Just, a lot of people who listen to me who think I actually have an accent and not a speech impediment tune into my words just because the speech pattern and the accent, it makes things different. And so you tend to pay attention to the fact that something is different more so than if somebody is just, a standardized English speaker. And this person tried, as they came into this region, they tried to get rid of their Southern draw. And the TV station said, no, we hired you because of this, and we want you to keep that. And so then they had to change their perception of what it means for them to have power or strength or feel safe. And they had to rethink their idea by not having to change who they are and actually pump up who they are to 120 degrees, because all of a sudden they found safety in
that's interesting.
in themselves, as opposed to what they thought the safety would be now that I moved into this region. Do you see what I mean?
Yeah. Two things. Back in the day, the national TV and radio stations all wanted people to have basically this we're not quite sure where they're from, but somewhere in the middle of the country type of accent. And so everybody sounded the same. If you just listen to any radio broadcast or TV thing from the 50s,
everybody kind of sounds like this. What's going on today?
That's just it. Everybody sounds like that.
Yeah. I missed that portion of America.
I did too, but that, and then same thing in the UK. Everybody on TV had the received pronunciation, and was all super it sounds really stuffy, but stuffy and proper and intelligent and whatever. Nowadays, I think the media companies have realized, having a bit of diversity in every context of that word, including how people sound and how people look and people's backgrounds, is actually more engaging, and people find that interesting. And it's like, here's what a Black woman has to think about it. Here's what a Hispanic man has to think about it. Too, that reminds me of anybody, any expat who has moved from one country to another and comes along with an accent of their previous life. It's like I imagine they're torn. There's some sort of battle. It's like, how much do I keep this accent? How much do I actively try to sound like a native of wherever I live now?
Yeah, but it's pain body based.
Right. And it's, in order to fit in more, or in order to not fit in more, like deliberately one or the other.
Yeah.
Versus I sound how I sound and I'm not going to do anything to change it.
Yeah. When I first came here, I think I told you this. I had, I wouldn't call them friends, but I had people that I knew that came here from Ukraine as well. And a lot of them tried to hide the fact that they were Ukrainian and tried to basically took lessons to drop the accent.
Right.
To forgo their identity and try to belong in as much as possible.
Right.
Which to me, it was like a shocker that somebody would even do that. In fact, they even changed their name to sound more American than
Smith.
Well, no, for their first name.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, right. To me, it was just a shocker. I'm like, oh, wow, I didn't even think that would be something that, do you know what I mean? Like if it's not part of your...
Right. Because to me, someone being foreign makes them extra interesting. Because I'm like, I've met a whole bunch of Americans, but
yeah, but
this is something
in that case, so this person tried to pursue belonging through getting rid of their cultural identity.
Yeah.
And the person who would pursue diving into the cultural identity and standing with it would be pursuing that in order to continue to identify a self also through force.
No, I get that.
Both of those things are still pain body driven activities.
No, I'm saying as a third person who meets someone, I guess that second one is more interesting.
Yeah, but it's still down out of a pain body.
Yeah, I know, I get that.
Right. Yeah, and I'm just right now evaluating that because when I came to United States, I never actually, and then, remember what I told you last week, I just remembered something from my other lifetime that basically explains not fitting in or belonging, right? Like as a baseline before I even came to Earth. Like the idea of doing anything at all in order to fit in didn't make any sense. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So which I guess is kind of a positive, but maybe a negative. Like the fact that I will be able to do anything at all in order to feel like I belong was not even a thought process. So it was just like, oh, I'm just going to be as is because guess what? This is the status quo and the status quo is not this. And it's interesting, not this period, regardless of being an English speaker, Ukrainian speaker, Russian speaker, from Earth or not from Earth. Do you know what I mean? Mm-hmm. It was just like, this is just you, period. Do you know what I mean? There's nothing to be done.
Yeah. I mean, that's a great place to be. Well, if you, I mean, in as much as if you are happy with yourself as you are.
Here's the difference. It wasn't, so now I'm realizing it wasn't happy with self as I am. It was resolved, given up to the fact that it is never something that is from here. Do you see what I mean? So,
right. That's similar, but that's not as good.
Yeah. So because it was like, yeah, there's just absolutely nothing because that is not from here. Not to say that I have to try to be from here, But I think the negative part about knowing that and remembering that and then having that as your status quo is you're never from here.
Mhm.
Which I'm like, I think that's fine, except that the deep down, I think the psyche, this is off the subject of language, but the psyche then therefore built in this parameter of therefore not home. Right.
Hmm.
And I think that was probably the more difficult part, is that not here is therefore home is elsewhere. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And so that's the part that was difficult. But the home was without language. And that's why it's so obvious to me that the issues of humanity to a very large extent stem out of identity through language.
Yeah.
Right. And then holding on to our identity through the vibratory frequency that we were raised with. And if you're trying to escape your language, if you're trying to not be who you are, you're running away from your identity or from your pain body as self. And if you're trying to hold on to where you are trying to keep that vibratory frequency as self because you feel like you need to still hold on to that past of you being there.
Yeah.
Do you see what I mean?
Yeah.
So when your pain body sets in before age of 7, right? What you do with your language after the age of 7 could be a great tool to realize what is it that you're trying to run away from or stick with in order to resolve your trauma. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
It's kind of like, it's almost like you could use that as a tool, which language was supposed to be a tool to communicate, because we, lost our telepathic ability, or stop utilizing it. That's the thing, is we never lost it. We just stopped utilizing it. But 2, what is that we are doing with the language forward in order to either heal or avoid healing our trauma?
Yeah.
Like in the examples of that Lakota guy, remember he said that he grew up and he mostly was raised in an Americanized version because his mother was placed in the boarding school to take away the Native American culture.
Awful story.
And then I'm assuming the dad, I don't know what the dad's story was, but so he was raised speaking English, American English as his primary culture, as his primary language. And when he went to buy a house on the Lakota reservation, the real estate agent spoke to him in their native language that he didn't understand.
He understood just a little bit
a little bit of it. But he said he went back to the car
and just cried. Not because he didn't understand it, but because of how it made him feel, the frequency of it.
But I think,
maybe also because
there's two folds.
There's
two truths.
There's a sadness that he had lost his culture and didn't speak it. Probably.
Yes. So in his case, the language that he did not speak, that he felt was the identity of his culture, he felt like he wasn't part of it.
Right.
And so hearing that language allowed him to realize subconsciously the amount of pain he felt as a Native American Lakotan, having that identity to be taken away from him and not feeling like he belonged to this simple conversation of a real estate transaction. He said it was 5 minutes and just completely lost himself.
Right.
But then 2, right, so there obviously everything has 2 meanings to it. There's what your pain body and trauma can get out of that in order for you to come back to self. And then in this case, because the language is basically a magical transmission of transcendence.
Especially that language.
Yeah, no, their languages.
Yeah.
No other language. Their language is a magical transmission of transcendence from an earthly based environment of speech into energetic frequency. He was able to touch on the higher version of himself that gave him hope into this larger scope of living. Do you see what I mean? Mm-hmm. So 2 things happen in that instance. He experienced his pain body and trauma that he was keeping inside, that he didn't allow himself to feel, which feels like he doesn't belong to the group of people that he actually belongs to. And then 2, it allowed him to realize the importance of belonging to that group of people because it transcends his experience on Earth.
Yeah.
So 2 things.
Yeah. I right after that, I went on Google Translate to see if I could translate into Lakota just to hear what different things would sound like. And it's not an option. And I'm like, that's weird because it's got hundreds of languages on there. And I search up why is Lakota not slash some people call it Sioux, the Sioux tribe, not on there. And now you can look at this. You can take this at face value. You can look at this a little cynically. They say that the way that modern computer language translation works is that you feed it just massive amounts of. Here is the exact same text in English and Spanish, and that's super easy because we have massive amounts of text, especially from UN documents. It's like, here's the same thing to all the nations in the UN in English and German and Spanish and Russian and Portuguese and Chinese and whatever. Same thing. And they go, and it's like, oh, well, it figures out this means this, this means this, this means this. And they just feed it just tons and tons and tons. And that doesn't exist for Lakota. There just isn't massive amounts of, here it is in some language, let's say English, and here it is in Lakota. We just don't have that, which is really sad because I wish that we could do that. Maybe a more cynical idea is that, somebody doesn't want that to be easy to translate into. Maybe not. I don't know.
He said all of their ceremonies, like Lakotan ceremonies, are for their natives only, right? And a lot of them are done in that language, and they do not want, I guess, if I would call the white man, to be participating in them. And so, like, one of the questions that Regina asked him is, how can the white man, start to touch on this knowledge or this language or whatever,
while still being respectful and not trying to appropriate it and stuff like that.
Yeah. But he said, like, oh, well, here's all these books that people wrote and are written like from the native elders, and they pass on the teachings to the white man in English. Oh, right.
Yeah.
Right. So.
Yeah.
Right.
I saw this this thing. It was this. He didn't say what language it was, but he said it was a nearly extinct language, and this guy's parents spoke it, and he understood a little bit of it, but he wasn't a fluent speaker. I wish I knew what language it was, but he actively didn't say. And he said, my parents speak this language that is nearly extinct. There's a handful of speakers left in the world. They're getting pretty old. What can I do to try to preserve this as much as I can? Is this a Reddit post? It was a Reddit post. And the answer was record everything. Just record everything and try to get it in that. He speaks a little bit, but he's not, B2 fluent. He's he can casually understand his parents, but he wouldn't be able to teach it to anybody. But they spoke it fluently. It was like, record everything in that language, and then what it means in English if you can. Just get the most amount you can, and and here's a bunch of like universities that have like extinct language departments that I'm sure would be interested in taking these and doing whatever they do with them. To feed that type of, here's what it means here, here's what it means there. The AI can figure out the how to, it can deduce grammar rules and, conjugation and stuff from that. To me, there's been a lot of, I guess surrender is the right word lately, but it's like the way off topic.
No, it's fine.
Noticing some resistance to something, some emotion, and I'm like, wait, I feel angry or frustrated or bored or whatever it is, and then it's like, why? And it's because what I want does not equal reality. There's some disconnect there. That's, kind of like the simplified version of why anybody is upset with anything, is because what you want and how reality is are not the same. What?
How? What do you mean? What do you want? Like, how does that translate into trauma?
I mean, at the surface level, it's like, if you're upset because you're cold, I want to be warm. I am not warm. So that's at the surface level. That's the problem, right?
Well, in that case, because freezing to death is directly associated with dying.
Sure. I mean, yeah, I would go there.
But what are you talking about?
I'm talking about at the surface level, being okay with whatever it is that is not the way that you want it to be, and feeling what that feels like. Feeling, I mean, even to where that goes at a deeper level. I'm trying to think of an example.
I think the only way to address it would be feeling where it goes.
Right.
Because it's not where it goes, it's where it's coming from.
Right. I mean, I guess that's what I mean by where it goes.
Yeah. But I think if you mentally, again, language-wise, have to make that distinction for yourself. You have to see my reality right now, and then thus my dissatisfaction with the current status quo is not stemming out from the circumstances.
Yeah.
It's stemming out from myself as a child drowning or screaming or doing whatever. And that feeling, that disconnect between me and not addressing that child at this moment right now is causing this reality.
Yeah. No, I mean,
you have to completely reverse the approach to healing.
Yeah. Yeah. When I say where it goes, I mean like drilling it down to where it's coming from.
Yeah,
I know they sound like
but
opposites,
like language-wise, this goes back to that big of an importance. You have to reverse the language.
And it basically always ends up with, because it's unsafe. Which can mean a whole lot of different things. But that's right. But then going, well, it's okay to be unsafe. It's okay to feel unsafe. And almost embracing it and going, let's feel unsafe for a while. Let's explore that, and not trying to fight it, because that's been my go-to my whole life, is to fight it, is to, what can I do to control this? What can I do to feel safe? How can I, craft my environment in order to suppress, mitigate whatever it is that is unsafe?
Well, that's the whole point of what I was talking about, people in military.
Yeah.
Then you go into fugue state where you're like, oh shit, this is like, I can't even move.
You're right. But that's what I've been trying to do, is to try to surrender into it.
Yeah, but in that state, the amount of energy that comes out and is trying to flow is bigger than any word or any description.
It is.
It transcends language.
It does.
And that's what I wanted to say, is you have to allow yourself to go into the space where you stop trying to define what you're feeling.
When in a nice deep meditation, there is no language. There may be like concepts, maybe. There may be visions, there may be experiences, but it isn't a language-based thing for me.
Yeah.
Which is really different from normal thinky life, where it is really language-based. Too much so, probably.
But that's what I'm saying. We use language to limit what we actually feel.
Mm-hmm.
Right? To begin with, you can't even get to this is interesting. Like to begin with, because we have locked ourselves away from our trauma, like in your case and in my case, right? We both have examples we've talked about in over the last couple of weeks where we have to use the language to get into that basically kind of like Pandora's box of trauma. But once we get into it with the language, once you find that word, and you can use that as basically kind of like a pathway in, right? After that, you have to open to concepts of yourself outside of language.
Right.
Stop trying to process or define what you actually feel and surrender. Now, because it's outside of language, it actually feels completely overwhelming.
Right.
Because it transcends the limited nature of our reality.
Yeah.
It transcends the limited vocabulary that we have to describe any one thing.
Right.
And you feel like you're going to quite literally like drown or die 1,000 deaths, right? Isn't there like some sort of proverb in Latso, or
The Tao.
the Tao, right? Like something about dying 1,000 deaths. And you're like, when you first hear it, you're like, I don't even know what the fuck that means.
Right.
But now when I go into that space where my child is dying or drowning or being dragged into some abyss of a black hole, that is quite literally how it feels like. It feels like I'm dying 1,000 deaths. Do you know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
But you have to be able to access that space. And I think the only place you can access that space is outside of the language, regardless of what language you speak.
An easy way to relate to that is like to try to describe a dream to someone, because dreams, well, yes, it's kind of like on one hand, it's kind of like a movie. You experience this, whatever, but really the dream is the feeling that you had during it. And you're like, well, I was walking down the sidewalk at my house, but it wasn't my house. But it was my house, but it wasn't my house. And everything was a little different. And you're like, okay. And there's a couple dozen words, but what that really means inside is like so profound. You're like, but it was like really significant. And the fact that it was my house, but not my house is like, that's really important or whatever it is. And you can't even convey the dream. It's a disservice to even try to explain a dream in words, because it's like, it's this very surface level. You're describing like frames from the movie of a dream.
Mm-hmm.
But the actual dream hits at this really deep level that words can like never even describe.
Yeah. But you leave your language.
You leave your language. You can experience the dream. You can, sit there and process the dream and what it means, but it's probably impossible to convey a dream in words.
Mm-hmm.
It's like you could try to describe a painting in words. And a picture's worth 1,000 words. That's the saying. But even with 1,000 words, you could not recreate a painting. Yeah,
but we have left, I think, for the most part, through, let's say, through our interpretation of time, we have left ourselves outside of the space where we're able to interpret reality at its true form, and have used the language to kind of limit our interpretation of reality, and actually have this very finite, very narrow interpretation of reality, and language as a tool for that. And so right now, because, it's interesting because right now, we're opening to this larger telepathic interpretation of our reality. But because of that, we're opening to be able to access ourselves past the barrier of our language, thus being able to go into the trauma that we have that exists outside of language. So does that make sense? Like, because we're shifting our reality into non-language based format,
mm-hmm.
we're also having to shift ourselves into a non-language based format. But in order to do that, we have to drop the density that requires us to be in the language based format. And the density is trauma. So we are basically kind of this like in reverse osmosis type of a way, facing our trauma because we're exiting out of this narrow spill of self into
Yeah.
a larger knowing.
I think that's one of the reasons why, like, Jungian style dream work to deal with, you know, trauma and stuff is probably useful. Is because it operates at a level deeper than language. In as much as, you know, dreams or something, what a dream means to you, especially if you know, can dig into the dream, like, and go, well, you know, well, this person represents my mother in the dream, and, you know, this represents, you know, safety. And if you can really get down into that, the dreams can be really profound and worked on at a level deeper than language alone would let you do it.
Yeah. I don't know anything about Jungian. There's something I downloaded a sample because I was like on the Amazon list after I finished my book. It was like, oh, expand your reading, whatever. And Jung was there. And so I downloaded.
I think I had some Jung stuff in my.
I downloaded whatever his first book is. And you know, I have a shtick with him.
He wrote it?
I don't know.
Okay.
He's, you know, sometimes like if somebody rewrote it, like they still have his name big and then at the bottom small letters. But I can't, you know, on the Kindle preview, I can't see the small letters. So who knows? I haven't started. I just downloaded a sample of it. But for some reason, and I don't know if I will not figure this out until I actually start reading his book, but for some reason, I have a shtick with his theory, argumentative type of a shtick that I feel like does disservice to Earth. Possibly not how he meant to have his information interpreted, but how we actually have his information interpreted. And so, you know, my whole shtick with like delivering something that is counterproductive to the development of the soul.
Uh-huh.
But you know, we talk about prophets, right? If you look at him as a prophet, which everybody who developed large scale of bodies of work that are outside of perception can be seen as prophet-like movement. But if we start interpreting his work as prophet type of a development, the second we have him not exist, one, and then the second his personal pain body comes in into his prophetizing, it does disservice to humanity. Right? So, does that make sense? And so I have this shtick with it, going back to Yiddish. Right? And so there's something about his way of development that has disservice.
I don't know. I mean, I'm curious. I know just a very, very high level of surface level of stuff about it.
But yeah, everything you say has me
reacting
in such a charged way.
Yeah.
That is disservice to humanity. And I have yet to read his stuff. But everything I hear, I'm like, okay, well, I can get behind this and I can behind that, I can get behind this. But I have this internal structure within me that like wants to oppose and ratify his teachings.
Yeah. And I'm not saying
Wait, what does ratify mean?
I don't know what ratify means. I mean, I'm not saying he's the end all be all of all knowledge, but I don't know. I think there's something about the fact that he was contemporary with Freud. And I'm just like, oh, Freud.
Is ratify a word?
There's ratify.
Maybe that's what it is.
So in comparison with Freud, I'm like, oh, well, Jung's definitely on the right path.
Wait, redefy, there's a redefy, like to redefine something. There's that.
To define in a different way?
But I'm combining ratify and redefy.
Ratify is like to approve or accept.
Okay, so here's what they're doing. they're taking ratify and redefy, and that is the concept.
Okay, we'll define that new word.
So ratify is to formally approve or confirm, and redefy is to redefine is to
change the definition.
Change the definition thereof. And so if you combine the two, it would be to change the definition and then have something be formally true.
Okay, so you think it almost like the same thing with Jesus, how the original message might be good, but then now it's kind of corrupt?
Yeah, so the path that he started on had truth within the concepts, but through whatever means, either his personal body getting inserted into his message, which a lot of times happens, or us misinterpreting the message through our own personal pain body. So I don't know which. We need to reinterpret his body of work to redefine his body of work if we wanted to stick to any of it. That's the thing, is it's either we redefine it and then therefore accept it through ratifying it and then go with that, or we have to scrape it all together.
I imagine that nobody is doing pure Jungian stuff anymore. I imagine it's been built upon over the, 50, 60, 70 years since he's died?
Which is just like Steiner.
Sure.
Right.
And now, there's some sort of, I assume there's some sort of neo-Jungian theory, which is
incorrect.
Whatever he had, plus modern theory and science and stuff.
Think about this.
And that's where people are now.
Yeah.
And I don't know enough about any of it to know if that's better or worse than what he thought. I don't know.
Yeah.
I assume people were like, well, let's go experiment and try this and try that and see which one works out better. I assume, but I do not know.
But there's scholars who have now wrote books on his theories.
Sure.
Right? Like they're going to take his concept, let's say, at whatever level of purity they interpret it at.
Right.
But let's be honest, I don't know what level that is. And then they take their impurity of their pain body and trauma and write a book on that.
And obviously, if you're inventing branches of psychology, you've got your own pain bodies to deal with. Because that's not something that you do for the fun of it. You do that because you're trying to figure yourself out. That's the only reason you go into psychology in the first place.
Yeah. Most of the people who go into psychology feel so fucked up that they need to figure themselves out in order to do that.
Freud's going, everything comes down to women have penis envy. Isn't that what he thought? I thought that was it. The whole problem with women is that they don't have penises and they're jealous of it. Was that a joke or was that real? I thought that was a real thing.
Wait, what? Seriously? I didn't know that.
Sigmund Freud's theory, penis envy, refers to a stage in the psychosexual development of young girls where they become aware of the physical differences between males and females' anatomy and feel a sense of loss or envy toward the penis. Freud believed this realization could lead to a shift in girls' emotional attachment, moving from the mother to the father and influencing their development of a female gender identity. So, if he has some theory, like if he's coming up with some theory like this, clearly there's some sort of Jungian projection going on here too.
What does that even mean?
I don't know.
I'm like in shock.
Yeah, well, that was one of Freud's central tenets, was women have penis envy.
Is his goal to shock people?
I don't think so.
Because I don't even know where to go from there. Why would I want a penis?
They're great.
Wait, what are you supposed to want to do with a penis as a girl?
I don't know. We can dive into that later.
Wow.
So
there should be an episode on penis envy.
There you go. What was my point with that? Oh, yeah. That
how fucked up you have to be.
How fucked up you have to be a psychiatrist, psychologist, especially if you're inventing these branches of it and you've got these, holy tenets laid down as the absolute truth. Especially,
does that remind you of something else? Or I have an issue with lately. Right. So there you go. Anytime somebody is so adamant about having one truth or this is the way, period,
Mhm.
is their inner child is so basically lost and fucked up at this point that the only form of survival they have is the idea that not only do they have to have ultimate control, they have to create a version of reality that is created by them, actualized by them, and thus applies to everybody around them. Do you see what I mean? This is how fucked up you have to be.
Calling them a prophet is
yes,
you're right on.
They have to create as a prophet, creating a version of reality that overrides all other versions of reality.
Oh, I know who you're talking about now.
And then thus and this is the only truth, and they have to prophetize themselves to make sure that this version is right. They adamantly argue it, and they prove it, and they basically become almost militant about it.
And any evidence, anything out there, this is evidence for this.
Or against it.
Well, no, everything is evidence for this, or there's something wrong with this experiment, and that evidence doesn't count.
But if there's an argument against it, right?
That something's wrong. It's not right.
Well, no, somehow it falls into some sort of version of this that's just that somebody fucked up in this way.
Yeah.
So it still fits into it.
Yeah.
Do you see what I mean?
The experiment was bad, or well, this doesn't really count, or this, yeah. Okay, I know who you're talking about.
But this is the status quo with anyone. I would wager to say, and I know this is also possibly a projection, in the patriarchal system of loss, of touch with the essence of self, and the adamancy behind them being right is crucial and imminent to their survival. And in order for them not to die, literal or metaphorical death as this child who's already dying, they have to hold on to this theory and propagate this theory at the most adamant level of truth, almost militantly, in order to have their child down here survive. Like, you could look at most of the sociopathic, pathological behavior and see that on this level. This adamancy to be a prophet, to claim yourself as the inventor of the latest, and then basically either militantly propose it and then pursue it as your truth, or just in egotistical way, place yourself at the higher level of self, and then therefore anything that is said that defies your reality or defies this knowledge that you have proposed now and prophesied internally or externally is below you. Because you basically have to take reality and all truth
and bend it to fit your theory instead of the other way around.
But if it doesn't fit, you have to dismiss it as nonsense.
Yeah.
Because the second you have to verbalize or actually even start to admit to any portion of your consciousness that this is in any way undermines your theory, your child will die.
Right. I mean, this is the same type of stuff where people, archaeologists especially, will not investigate. Don't seem to be interested in investigating things that might disprove the common theory of the history of humanity.
Well, no, yeah, but that is because their identity is wrapped in them being a prestigious archaeologist.
Right.
And the second, if their prestige is linked to their survival of their trauma of their child, they will never bring anything forth into acceptance that basically has their identity be threatened. And as the second their identity threatened, the trauma of the child surviving and not drowning and not being pulled into complete hole of abyss it is quite literally dying 1,000 deaths. Who wants to die 1,000 deaths? No one.
And to me, it's like, but like pioneering a new thing, which, may be right, may be wrong, but would be groundbreaking. Seems like while a gamble, the upside's really big to that. The down. Maybe
Nope.
it's just that the downside is so scary.
No.
Excommunication from the tribe of archaeologists.
Your pain body is to stand out as special and unique, and your idea of diving into something groundbreaking would facilitate the facilitation of that pain body being fulfilled and your child not drowning.
But I imagine people go into archaeology, have this sort of Indiana Jones idea of it. This like.
But no.
Well, they go into archaeology because they want to make the big discovery.
Pause and see why your idea.
No, I do see that. I do see that.
So
But
to you, it'd be detrimental for survival in order to be just like everybody else and fit into the norm.
Yeah, but it.
So your child will be drowning if I say, well, no, you're just average, and here's the theory of archaeology, and you're just another archaeologist, and you have to support and dig shit up that relates to the theory of this archaeology.
I do see that.
Yeah.
But it seems unlikely that nobody
has the
is
same
like
pain
that.
body?
Yeah. Seems like
There's the two opposites. You have the pain body of, I have to find new shit in order to be special.
Mm-hmm.
That's what they think they want, right?
The Graham Hancock end of it.
Yes. Graham Hancock is pursuing, I'm going to say all this radical shit, and I'm going to identify alien, ancient alien civilizations. And that would be my definition of identity. So when I die, I'm the guy who pushed past the norm and I have identified this stuff. That is how he will be seen as loved and then therefore saved. Then
there's the Zahi Hawass end of it where protect the mainstream idea at all costs. I don't know. That's as an example. It would be a bad idea to dig under the Sphinx, because if we find nothing, we've wasted time and desecrated the Sphinx. And if we find something, that could be dangerous to the concept of...
No, that's not... No. So the truth is, Zahi Hawass actually has that archaeological, we're going to find this incredible stuff, regardless of where it leads spirit. But at some point, the pain body of going against the mainstream and being made fun of, right? Which is what archaeologists face. I want to be the breakthrough hero, and I want the world to see me as this special person who found this special stuff, and that's the legacy that people will remember me, and I will get love from that. But when you start pursuing that path, and all of a sudden the amount of love that you get is actually hate, your psyche goes, wait, this thought process is not having me receive the dopamine or the oxy that I need in order to survive. And then sooner or later you go, oh no, I need to blend into the norm for the survival. If that was not your initial goal, but some people, their pain body would have a goal of just blending in.
I mean, maybe a little conspiracy theory-ish, but there may be people and powers above him that don't want him to do stuff too.
Oh yeah, no, yeah, he has no power whatsoever in Egypt, and he's basically just a puppet for the system. So yeah, to say that he has this agenda, but then why is he doing that? We're facing Egyptian bureaucracy, which is completely, off the topic. We're already off the topic. But yeah, language.
Maybe we should wrap it up.
Yeah, it has been a long time.
2 hours, I think.
Oh, okay. Yeah. And then maybe you'll be able to shave some stuff off. But yeah, no, right? We pursue things that do or do not align with us solely from our pain body.
Mm-hmm.
And our language there is as the system that keeps it in check, keeps it in place. It keeps our world exposed to X possibilities. And the second, sometimes think about this. If somebody says a word and it's a trigger, oh, that's a no-no square. You don't go there.
No, yeah.
So the language sometimes, just hearing one word can literally trigger you into some sort of experience that you're either desiring not to have, but if your goal is to experience trauma and pain in order to integrate it.
That's very true.
Right. So just that. Just if all of this was nonsense, just to realize that there are some words that can be said that would send you into complete chaos. Not even a concept, just one word.
Mhm.
Like I have a word, you know what it is in German, right? Like, or there are aerates out, right? In that case, it's not even a word,
Just a
it's a
sound.
sound. It's a
Right.
frequency, a designed frequency that does something to my psyche.
Yeah.
And we're kind of tied to that. I mean, both in a positive and a negative way, depending on how you choose to use that.
Yeah.
If you're aware of what this language system has done to you, then you can use it as a tool to undo it. But if you spend most of the time allowing yourself to seek identity in whatever this language system has allowing you to be, you can actually use it as a tool for blindness.
Yeah.
So, both are possible depending on how much awareness you bring in. The end.
The end. Thanks for listening.
Thanks for listening.